Hello everyone. Welcome to the Out of the Box developer session. Today, as you can see, we have a lot of people on the board, and I will be hosting the session. My name is Hugo. As you see me many times in this session. You also know very well Pedro Cavaleiro and Mani Sarkar, that is always here with me. And I want to give some a space here to actually Danilo and Douglas to introduce yourself, so people can see you guys. Danilo, can you go first? We can tell a little bit about you for our audience.
Oh, sure. Hey everyone, how are you doing? I'm Danilo. I'm a software craftsman, and today I just enjoying to the invite that Hugo did for me, and not just for me, for other people as Douglas. So thank you for that, and I hope to contribute to our group here.
Great, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Danilo. I hope to have. We are growing here and need more help to actually manage all the stuff. So I'm very happy to have you here. And Douglas, can you just give an introduction of yourself?
Sure, sure. First of all, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you
Excellent.
are.
Okay. All right. So, thanks for having me. Glad to see everyone here. Um, I've been in software development now for a little over 22 years. I'm a self-taught developer, so coming from that time frame, that's a little bit. It was really hard to get into the field at that time, but um, worked in a lot of different technologies. So I've worked in .NET, worked in Java. Now I'm working in Python. Just been a little bit, all over the place. But that's me. Oh, one more thing. I actually have held different positions throughout my career. So I've also been a manager, and I was CTO of a startup at one time too. So I've been in that boat. So it's a really cool episode. I'm glad to be here. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, that's great to know because today's session we'll be talking, we'll extend our discussion actually from the last session. I let Pedro and Moni alone last session, and they did a great job here talking about what employers expect from us developers in the tech industry, right? So we have a lot of insights there. Bruno also give his contribution on this topic. It will be great to have you, Douglas, here too. And today we're also not just our team board new people here. We also have a special guest. It is Pedro's friend here. He's a CTO on 7gen company. He also have other experiences being CTO also in other companies, and it will be great to discuss this topic. So I want to give a warm welcome to Fabio. Hey Fabio, how are you?
Hey, I'm fine. Well, yeah, I'm Pedro's friend. I work as a software engineer for 20 years now, and in the last 7 years, almost 7 years maybe, I work as a CTO. I was first a CTO in a fundraising company. In a moment that I helped them to unlock the growth, setting the engineering standards, refactoring, teaching how to refactor lots of code, working about improving communication inside the teams, team building, lots of activities. And during the pandemic, I did a career change. I started working in the EV industry, trying to learn the most I can about electrical vehicles and chargers and how to build products and business around this technology. Like the world needs to become green over the next decades, and I'm a part of this journey at this early moment. So nice to meet you, and I will be happy to contribute with the discussion today.
Perfect. Nice to meet you too, and thanks for being here and accepting our invite. Uh, we also have Chila in backstages. She'll be managing here the live chat. So if you are watching us here, I see Ellie Cruz just said hello. So hello, Ellie Cruz. Yeah, if you are watching us and you want to know more, share your question here on the chat. We'll have this board of so many experienced people, and it will be a great chance to you also to get your question answered by experienced people. So, hey, Manny, how do we start here today? What was the last thoughts and the last insights we had on the last session, and how we can move forward with the questions here?
So I'll be honest here that we didn't have a fixed consensus of what it should be and what the right answer is, because there are so many angles and so many perspectives to what we've been talking about in this specific question. Because what we actually, from what we were talking last time, was um, the employers have a different perspective and a different expectation from us, whereas we as employees have a different perspective and expectation from the employers. And the industry on its own is so dynamic and even volatile that both employers and employees can be confused or not clear on coming up with like a concrete idea of what they want. Like, unlike another profession where the industry doesn't move so fast, like we were comparing the software industry with many other industries, and we actually compare it with the automobile and the aeronautics industry, and we saw how far apart software industry is in terms of progress and achievement uh, compared to those other industries, that we cannot think of another example in another industry that is like the software industry, which is like, the roles are changing every 18 months, or sometimes even 9 months. uh, Technology itself is progressing from anywhere to 9 to 18 months. So it's really hard for both sides to keep up, right? The employers to keep up with what really should the employee look like an ideal employee, and the employees are thinking, what's the best job, like, that I want to have. Because after 18 months or 2 years or sometimes 5 years, maybe, and these days it's much quicker than that, people find out that actually the ideal job I thought is no longer the ideal job. It's something else, right? So we didn't have like a fixed consensus, and this is where that question, what employees expect from us in the tech industry, can have many answers, and not necessarily every answer is a satisfactory answer. And maybe at the same time, every answer is as close as possible to the answer you want to hear, but it's not an answer that'll stay fixed. You cannot set it in stone. It'll change as the time changes, as the industry progresses. So this is where we were with our conclusions from the last time, and Bruno had some great insights. And I see him; he's arrived in the chat. As my prediction was, he would try to be here in some form or shape. He is listening to our show, even though he cannot make it online. But you never know; he might just surprise us and just sign in. So yeah, that was what I was picking up from last time, and I put forward. So Pedro, what were your thoughts from our conversation the last time? I think we kind of left at this note, right, where we were not clear
Mhm.
which side wants what, and how do we work, how can the two sides come together and work together and actually grow together.
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to add the part of communication stuff. We talked a lot. The one of the biggest problems we have between the the developers and management or business is the communication, right? Because every time we see some problem, they say, "Oh, the developers don't understand that what the business needs," or other side around, some, oh, the business doesn't understand that we need some stuff in technology that is not possible like today, or we need to do something that's just technology based, and not and has could may have directly integrated with the business. So I think we can. Well, this is something we discussed the last time, and I think it's a very important topic to bring today and to discuss about uh, 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 the with the two CTOs we have here, right? Say, oh, how do you if they get like what do you think? If they believe that what's the biggest problem we have today between this understanding between the developers and the business and the managers.
So I think that's a great start. So since Douglas also said you have been a CTO and Fabio is working on this position now, what is what do
I
you
was going
think?
just going to another room, so
Oh, no problem.
yes.
But I'll pass to Douglas then, while Fabio comes back here. But Douglas, what do you think it is the biggest challenge for that you see for when you are a developer actually, and to actually have the employer's expectation achieved? What do you think it is
That's
the
a
yeah.
That's a really good question. So, I mean, if you're thinking about from the developer perspective and toward the employer, a lot of the times in a larger company, so like you work in like extremely large companies where I'm at, like where I'm right now, one of the biggest challenges to being able to accomplish the tasks that you're given is just the process, the tax that you pay because of how large the corporation is or how much it's regulated, to be able to get something simply done, like just roll something into a UAT environment, for instance, may take a week of getting the right users created and getting everything configured. And there's just so much more to it than writing code. And so uh, as as someone that's been on both sides of this, I've had to manage people in this kind of environment, and I've had to actually manage up in this environment. It it's a challenge to communicate that those obstacles are in the way. Your managers very well know how hard it is to get something done, but when it comes down time to actually deliver something on time and keep track of it, it's difficult. One thing that I've done to try to mitigate that is to have very tight feedback loops. Like, it doesn't have to be synchronous communication, but if you just have like a place where people are communicating and saying this is where we're at. And that's really where stand-ups come into play too, but it's got to be a little bit more organized than even in a stand-up. We've got boards that say what's going on, what's holding things up, and we have people that actually maintain those boards and keep track of it. But it's still very frustrating. So from a developer perspective, um, there's expectations on you, and you're not delivering as quickly as people would like. And if you're a certain type of developer, which I am of that type, that doesn't like to give excuses, it's really hard because sometimes there's just no way around how hard it is to get something done. Now that's the perspective of someone working in a large corporate enterprise. It's completely different when in a startup. And I want to be very clear here. I was not a CTO for years and years like Fabio was. I had one startup where they offered me, they wanted me to be the CTO, and I took it on. And there was a lot of new things that I had to learn during that time that I worked as the CTO. But I'm going to say that Fabio is going to have a lot more experience from that CTO seat than I am, talking from that perspective. But from a development perspective, um, I guess it really is about the expectations and being able to manage the expectations of the people wanting something from you. That's it. That's actually really it. It's managing the expectations. They have expectations, but you have to be a good communication with them, and that's a challenge. Is managing the expectations up the chain as well as down the chain.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Fabio.
Yeah, I think it's something that I always encourage my teams. I really give them many incentives to do early feedback. Uh, the communication is essentially the hardest part of our job. We can, as engineers, as developers, we love to solve problems. We love to learn new technology. We love to have the hard problems to solve. We love to be challenged to solve problems. But not all the times we are good on communicating stuff. And it's hard if you don't provide early feedback to your team or to your manager or whoever is responsible for your project. It's hard to know if you are going to spend a lot of energy and time solving the wrong problem, or maybe solving the right problem but choosing not optimal solution, or something that okay, it's solve it but it will create more problems. So the only way that you know you are choosing, okay, I understood the problem. I'm selecting this initial approach to solve this problem. I may be wrong. You can always be wrong. But if you collect early feedback, then you can validate your assumptions. Hey, okay, I didn't understand the problem correctly. My manager or my collaborator gave me another perspective that I didn't have. And then now I have an improved understanding of what I need to solve. This is really, really common in all levels of engineers. You can be a junior or you can be a senior. You are subject to make this kind of mistake. It doesn't depend on your seniority. You need to communicate with someone else to understand, hey, okay, I'm working in the right problem, and the way I'm thinking about solving this problem is good. Maybe someone better idea is in the head of someone else. Someone eventually can give you a simple idea that was not even part of the original problem, but makes all the difference. Okay, so early feedback is a key uh, for when you start working on a problem. I can talk more about that, but I want to hear you first.
Actually, I have one more thing that I would throw in there too, which is culture, right? So as a leader, to have that communication, you have to establish a culture of safety that lets people know that they can communicate and they won't actually be dismissed or punished or anything like that. So that there is an open collaborative environment. And that's a huge challenge with developers because a lot of developers are very strongly opinionated about their thoughts on things. So Fabio, how have you fought that to a certain extent?
Yeah, it's a very good question. You certainly need to have this kind of open and safe environment. This is the key. And at the end of the day, it's not easy. Even for someone who is a manager, a boss, sometimes he encourages the developer to do that, and sometimes developers they don't have the experience or they bring bad experiences from the past. So you have really to work on this and make sure that your developers understand they are in a safe space and the culture of the company aligns on the direction that everybody is welcome to collaborate and understand that everybody can be part of the solution. Yeah, essentially.
Yeah, but
Well, yeah.
one thing that in this question that Douglas asked, uh, that sometimes developers are strongly opinionated. So sometimes if when you bring the developers to the discussions and when in the middle of like business discussions or manager discussions, and then you bring developers and they have this strongly opinionated, they sometimes if you argue with them and say, oh, do we really need to be that complex, or do we really need to take that long to do something? And they like argue about against it, say, oh, we cannot do this differently. It's the right way to do. How it is. How do you handle this kind of, of problem during the day to day?
Yeah, that is always, even if you're opinionated, you also need to set the appetite. I really like the shape up methodology. It's something that I read in a Basecamp book. And you need to set the appetite. Okay, you can be very opinionated and you want to bring me a solution that you need like several days or several weeks to implement. I don't know, depending on the complexity of that. But if you say, okay, I need a solution to just to validate one assumption, it doesn't need to be complete, it doesn't need to be perfect, but this part of the problem I need you to validate to me. And you have only like a few days or 1 week or 2 weeks to validate that. And if it doesn't work, okay, we just start over. We validated that assumption. Okay, if you set the appetite, if you set, okay, you have a limited amount of time to work on that. Let's just do a quick validation, and if your solution works, okay, then I can give you an extension and you can move forward. But if you set this expectation about, okay, I want a solution for 1 week, you have time to develop this solution for a bit more time, or you can build a more complete architecture. You have to set this at the beginning. So it's like the key of communication, right? If you set the expectation and if you combine what you want with your collaborators before you start the work, it's easier. Uh, but yeah, it's not something that is simple to solve. But if you set the expectation first, it helps you a lot.
Cool. Yeah, I was here trying to ask more questions too. When I hear about culture, and maybe not just Fabio, maybe others too can contribute, but now we are in a mode where we can work in a totally totally different place. People from totally different places. You are in Canada now, but both Pedro and you are Brazilians. And how is it affecting employers? What is the biggest challenges when we are working on these multicultural teams, and how it becomes much, I don't know if it became much difficult or not. I believe it is much more challenging for who is employing people from different places to, I don't know, to manage it. But and yeah, I want to hear a bit from your experience, how it affected you. And want to say hello to Max. I just see his message here. Hello, Max. Good to hear you. Good to have you here. Please drop your questions if you have any questions here. It will be amazing to answer anything that you have to contribute here. So please, Fabio, can you give us some idea about it? Yeah.
Mhm. Right now I'm working here in Vancouver, and my team is here. There is another Brazilian company. We are a small team right now. We're a really early stage startup. So I will try to talk about my previous experience where there were people working from China, from India. One of the challenges was the time zone. As a CTO, I tried to be available for them. I adapted my working hours to be available early in the morning and late in the night, and have my Brazilian day free for other activities, personal activities. But I try to work in the beginning and at the end of the day to become available for them in their time zones. So I think if you are a team leader, and you have this kind of challenge of having people working from many parts of the world, you have to be flexible about your working hours to be able to connect and to talk with your teams in different time zones. Was a challenge for me in the beginning. It's also you have to you have to have considerations about the culture. It's different when you work from people from another continent and another colleagues in Brazil. Like Brazil has a culture of development. Maybe Pedro can talk a bit more about that, like a survival mode. So people is like working, like optimizing stuff and trying to do smart solutions that will not take a lot of time because your startup doesn't have enough fundings and etc. So we try to be very optimal on solving things in smart ways. Other companies have more resources, so you have more time and more structure. You have more opportunities to discuss architecture and solutions and etc. You have more time. Sometimes in companies I worked in Brazil, we really always had short deadlines and small MVP validations. We are extremely agile because there was no alternative on that. Another thing that in my experience on working on people with people in other parts of the world is that there are many types of developers. There are more developers that are very skilled on only doing, okay, what's the task? What's the next task? What's the next task? You give 10 tasks to that person will solve that. Eventually, the person will be very efficient. It will give you the solution. Sometimes it needs to do them do some bug fixes, etc. But the person is very efficient on delivering tasks. And there are other persons that are more they are better on like thinking about the problem. Okay, so that person will be a bit slow on delivering the task, but the person thought about the solution more, so the solution will be more reliable, will be more tested, or even you can split the tasks to do better delegation to other developers. So you have to learn about, yeah, working in different time zones, working with different types of developers. uh, yeah, there are many things that you have to learn and adapt through the process and through the resources and time you have for your project.
And I just want to add here, and since we we talked about the challenges on the employers or for the manager side, and for the developers, there are many developers also that are aiming for working abroad on an international team, and for those developers, how they actually can manage their leader or manager expectation, or how they can be more better on their on what they do for their employees, so they can actually grow even in international career. I think there are also maybe something challenging. And yeah, I'm talking here with Fabio, but any of you that have any experience, you can also give some contribution.
I think there is no formula, to be honest. If you exercise the communication, setting the expectations, and, hey, okay, that is this. Let me share one different perspective. I knew people that wanted to work in a project, like they were really motivated, but they were afraid of asking to work on that because they asked they could not be capable of joining that team. So, like, your manager doesn't care. Like, your manager needs to understand that you want to work in the project. Then your manager wants your motivation. Your manager wants needs to know that you want to be challenged. And if you are in this position of, okay, I think I can get more responsibility. I think I can get problems a bit harder, or I just want to learn something that's in a part of the project that I'm not working right now. Just make the communication work, as set the expectations about your career. Be transparent. This is the key. Like communication, transparency. Just that the person know you want to work on that project is a way of thinking about that. But I want to hear the opinions of my peers
Yeah.
here.
Oh, one thing that this came to my mind is that there's a meeting called it's one-on-one that you can. That's I think that's the better place to have these expectations aligned is with your manager, not just with your manager, but with other teammates, and then there you can talk about it, not just about your current job, but what you can do to get to grow from your career. That's one place. That's must be a safe place to talk about it. And
But I
I
will
just, oh,
go ahead.
go ahead. I just got another question, but go ahead with the topic.
Well, I was going to say that I would add on to the one-on-one. Again, there's I will lean on culture a lot because a lot of what we're going to say is it comes down to communication, and communication is going to be a two-way street. And so one of the things that even when you're looking to jump into a company, um, get a feel. Like most of the time, you're going to talk to people one or two levels of management higher than you are. and the manager is going to be at that point, and sit there and talk to them about this kind of stuff. Like, what does communication look like in the company? Because if you jump into a company that you don't feel like you could talk to your manager in the one-on-one about things, and it may not even be the manager, right? It may be you, not the manager, that's causing the hesitancy here. But if you are walking into a bad culture, uh, you're going to be really miserable there, and some of what we're saying may not even be applicable to you, because you may not be able to talk to your manager. Your manager may be ruling with an iron fist and say, "Do this thing the way I said to do it, or you're fired." It really, those places exist. I've had experience with people over me that have kind of been a little bit more aggressive in how they've done things. But like right now, I work for a manager. The guy above me is has I've worked with him in the past, and I've known him for like 9 years, and we have philosophical conversations, outside of work, and there's a lot of safety with this one, right? But I've been in other places where I would not just say anything or communicate anything up, to those people. I'd be very careful in how I crafted the message based on what my understanding is of how they receive messages, and um, and what their goals are. Like, you have to do a lot more analysis depending on who it is you're working for. And so I kind of want to put the caveat in there to be careful. When we say be open, also be smart about that too. Understand your culture that you're in, and if it's not something you like, maybe it's time to move on.
I'd like to make a comment on that. I I worked in very different places. And uh, at first I was a military, right? So in the military, you have this one-on-one stuff. You have to have very, very careful when you talk to someone, and especially when you talk to someone in a higher grade of yours, right? And this is a problem in military. We always have someone. You always know if someone is above you or higher than you. So, for example, your direct manager may be someone that's higher grade than you, but you can work for someone that's higher than them. And if you talk to the one that's higher than him, and something happens, like, oh, maybe you open your heart and say, oh man, I'm having had a hard time with this guy, you know, you are in trouble. Because in military, it's like this. Military has this stricter rules about it. You should not like bypass a
Chain of command.
grade. Yeah, you
Chain
chain
of
of
command.
command. That's the name. And you say, okay, it's military, but it looks the same in many places, right? Like in big corporations, and we call in big corporations not call it chain of command. We may call it politicus, but but it's exactly like that, right? Sometimes you have to understand how to play the politics of the company to survive there, right? That's the point. So sometimes the company is not that toxic, and but even so, even though you need to know how to handle the politics, this is something complicated. For example, one example, I have a friend, and he works in a big aeronautics company here in Brazil, uh, and he wants to be transferred to US. This is an example, and he knows that if he talks to his manager, it'll not work because we'll have any kind of some kinds of conflict of interests, right? His manager wants to, to be transferred as well, or the manager doesn't want him to leave his team, you know? And they say, oh, and how do I do that? And this is the thing when I think about the smart way to think. Say, okay, if you go to someone at a higher grade than your manager, you may be in trouble, right? But if you go to the guy in US that you already know, you have worked with them, and say to them, oh, and say to them, oh, if you have an open position there, you can like say, oh, ask for me from the other side, not me doing this, but you asking for me, like this kind of politics on the companies. Uh, for developers is the same. So sometimes you as a developer you need to think about the same, right? And sometimes you want to change teams. I have a friend, a friend of ours, right? Hugo. He was talking to me in the TDC that he that he wants to change teams, and he had a problem with his manager. Say, I will change teams now, but and then he asked he asked the other manager say, "Oh, please, can you can you get me here, save me here?" Right? Complicated.
Yes, and yeah,
You remember this story, right? You
yeah, sure. And things is at least when we say about politics, we feel like many developers feels like it's a bad thing, but actually it's a necessary, and actually it's a great way to negotiate, right? To have to grow in the career. I think there's uh, how can I say it? I at least can say myself that I I wouldn't like to spend my time by uh, doing politics inside the company and things like that. I will just focus on developer because it's what I like. But our career, the whole career, and in our it's part of our profession actually to be able to negotiate and able to show your value and navigate inside the company's rules. I'm not sure if it's the same. I believe it's the same for any company that we join, right? And that's one very interesting thing, especially when we are talking. I'll hit a lot on the working in different places because that's for me it might be the biggest challenge in communication, right? We are in a different culture, in a different with different people from different places. So there is any what is the biggest mistakes that you see developers does when it comes to negotiate or to communicate between uh, others other people in the team inside their team or with their superior the people that is with their managers or leaders. Can you think about one of them, Fabio? Or
Yeah. I think it's something you have to be very careful about being strongly opinionated. This is something that's not always good to when you do politics. I personally don't like this part of the job of this politics, etc. I prefer to think about, hey, okay, I'm talking with other humans and we are trying to solve problems together, and okay, we are part of the same company. If it succeeds, it will be good for everyone. But I know this is not the reality in many workplaces. uh, but when you have to jump into a discussion, you have to be open-minded, you have to open-hearted, and if you are strongly opinionated, maybe there is a chance that your opinion will not be listened by the other peers. It's easier when you are open to this discussion and put your beliefs aside for some time and hear other people, and just treat them as a humans, like they are not your enemies. You're not in a battlefield. Like their
true.
ideas can actually, when you have many people thinking about the same problem, the better ideas will arise. And if you put your opinions on top of your colleagues' ideas, you're losing lots of opportunities to yourself, to your own growth. So this is my main thinking about that.
Yes, one thing that I thought about it is that I know a lot of software developers that they don't like politics, and then they just jump in from being a manager or even a CTO, and then they just came back to being a software developer just because they don't like it. And one of the things I like to think about politics is that's something that we can't avoid it. And probably one of the biggest challenges to think about politics is that when it starts to be a barrier in our culture to have I don't know, maybe our expectations aligned or something like that, that's a problem. And that's why a lot of people that just became manager, or let's think about a staff plus engineer or even a CTO, they start to reach this kind of politics, and then they just don't like it. It's something that really it's a problem that happens in a company, but it's hard to avoid it, and it's hard not just to avoid it, but to think about how to handle all this situation around it.
Well, I would
I
say
think the
that
oh
oh,
sorry, please.
well, I was just going to say that I've had a chance to read a lot of books in the idea of psychology, and one of my favorites, I forget who the author is, but what was it? It was called The Courage to Be Disliked. And that book right there, I won't go into a whole synopsis, but there's a track in psychology called Adlerian psychology, and there's a lot to it, but I won't go into all that. But the main thesis of it is that all problems stem from human to human communication. All problems stem from that. And it goes on to a set of different thoughts or different processes you could use to try to help with that. There's a whole different way. It's a full inversion of how we intuitively think about communicating and handling each other. But I don't want to get into a debate about Adlerian psychology on this on this show. But I'm just saying that the point is that anytime anytime that there's people and these people have to communicate and work together, it creates an environment that can have a lot of good things happen, and that a lot of bad things can happen in. It there's even a difference in how people communicate. There's different communication styles. You may have some people who prefer verbal communication. You may have some people that prefer written communication for various reasons. And there's a lot of neurodiversity out there. There's people that have all sorts of different conditions that will cause. It's not just culture from country to country, but just even in neurodivergence. There's a lot of differences in how people work. So I guess the point is, the challenge is, as someone who has to like keep a team running and try to set the culture as a leader, it's your job to set the culture of your team, and keep that in line. If you want a safe culture, then you have to see when something's going wrong and start to mentor and coach the people into how to solve it. I'm not saying go with an iron fist and start beating developers on the head to say you're going to do these things the way I say it at first, right? But you try to help the people that are working for you adapt and come together and learn how to work together, instead of you know eh, to try to handle all of that diversity. But it's definitely a challenge too, from a leadership perspective. And you know what? It's hard. I have chosen to walk up and become management, and I've chosen to come back down and go back into more technical, architecture type work. And I've done this a couple of times in my career. It just depends on which challenges I want at the time.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, there isn't any right answer, and there are so many facets to it, isn't it? It's not like a certain combination works and a certain combination is correct. Uh, it's it's like you win some, you lose some, and that's always going to be the zero sum game. And yeah, this cultural barrier, actually, the question Hugo started off with is, so there's two levels of culture here, right? There's one is we come from different ethnic and cultural backgrounds by itself, right? Where communication is, and the way we treat people and communicate with people and expect things from people is one thing. And the second is like the professional culture that is expected to be, it's like a standard expectation across the board, right? Today we no longer are, oh, that's America and that's Asia and that's Africa and that's Middle East. It's like a flat ground, isn't it? It's like one global village. It's like one flat playing field. Everybody is expected uh, to behave and treat each other in the same way that somebody else would expect from the other person. So there it becomes even harder for some cultures and maybe easier for some other cultures. But then the ones that they find it easier, they keep thinking, why is that they are not doing it this way? And the one for who it's harder is thinking, I'm doing all the best and everything, and they still don't seem to be happy about it. So I'm not the problem. I think they are the problem, right?
I mean, yeah, even
Cool.
acknowledgement of doing a good job could be completely different based on the culture.
Yeah.
You may not get a pat on the back, good job, depending on where you're doing the work.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I think I can't remember. It was an onboarding process I was going through, and there was comparisons made between people working in Europe, Japan, and some other place. And in Japan, you're not going to, and Hugo can confirm this. You're not going to get a pat on your back saying, "Hey, great job." No, you're supposed to be proficient enough, and you're expected to do a great job, and is a default expectation from you. Whereas you go another part of the world, and somebody will like just applaud for like the smallest thing you could do, and somewhere else it's in between. So yeah, yeah, it's spot on that. That you don't get a applaud or a pat on the back for what you do, where it's an expectation in certain cultures.
Yeah, I don't have broad experience working in Japan, but what I had, yeah, I can confirm this behavior
Yeah.
there. Well, I also want to. It was lots of great insights here, but I want to give space here to Yuri Santana, who contributed here with a comment here that I think that 70% of leader skills is communication. A software developer could be a leader or a manager. And yeah, I agree with you, Yuri. There's many people that grows in career and we become leaders or managers, but still I believe that's still challenging for many of them, right? I'm not sure if you guys want to add some comment on Yuri's comments here.
Pedro is trying to say something, but he's probably on mute. Okay. Whilst you're
Okay.
working on it, Pedro, I'm going to take the opportunity and say, this is my perspective, and I could be wrong. I feel that they are orthogonal, right? Because if you look at from the role perspective, if you're doing one role that you will be able to do another role is a hit or a miss. It's very subjective to the person who would be doing those roles, if they have those capabilities or the qualities and traits to be able to do that role. So, for example, the statement is um, that a software developer could be a leader or a manager. Anyone can be a leader or a manager if they have those qualities needed to be a leader and a manager. And the fact that they are doing software development could be a side trait, but more that they can be a leader or a manager is just qualities innate in them. Do they have those qualities, or can they develop those qualities? As opposed to, because A lot of times, great leaders and great managers are probably not even experts in the subject matter that they are managers and leaders of. They can be, right? And I have worked with such leaders and managers. They may not be technical, but they exactly know how to communicate with you to get you do the job that needs to be done to deliver the solutions you need to deliver in the way that it needs to be delivered. Right? They're great go-betweeners between yourself and the other stakeholders who need your solutions. So that's my perspective on it, and not saying he's wrong, but I'm saying that that is, we cannot say just because one person does one role they can do the other role. It's very subjective to who that person is, not the role that they're doing. That's my view on that.
I think you have to have a passion. Like you'd have to want to be uh, a leader. And actually, let me think about that for a minute because there's a bit of a philosophical conversation around the want to be a leader. I've actually found the people that are vying for leadership, some of the ones I've interacted with that want to be called the leader, have actually been some of the worst people I've worked for. The ones that want to be the manager, that want to be. And some of the best ones that I've worked for have been the ones that have been, it kind of got thrust upon them because they were doing the job of a manager. They were doing the job of like leadership before that they were ever offered the promotion. They didn't ask for it. They were doing it, and they got there that way. So it's not everyone can do it unless that. I think the question you came up, can it be taught, is a really good question. And I think that there's leadership training out there. There are people that do train that do have workshops around learning how to be a better leader. And I want to believe that you can be trained. That you can be taught to look for things and how to influence and how to do that stuff. But I think there's some people that just kind of get it, right? There's some people that have it; it's innate, and their experience, and just get them in a room with people, and they're going to all do what that person, the vision that person has. That'll be the way that they're going to go. So it's an interesting question. It's an interesting thought.
I think Alfio also added here for this for the comment. I agree. Hello, Alfio. I agree. Some senior developers are just geniuses, technically talking. However, to be a leader, you will need some other skills. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Yep. Go ahead, Mani.
So yeah, so they are orthogonal in skill set as well, right? Technical skills are hard skills, let's say, whereas leadership skills are a lot more softer skills. Maybe there are some hard skills in there as well, but they are more softer people skills, right? Because a leader doesn't have to be technical. If they are technical, that's icing on the cake. But it's more, they need to be more people and uh, everything else around that, around the technology is what they need to be. And it's, if they have technical skills, that actually adds a bonus because then they can speak the lingo even better. But it's more people qualities that is expected of a leader. And yeah,
I think
those are the other skills, and either you develop them, you have them in yourself and you develop them further, uh, or it's just it's a lot of hard training to become a leader, because then you have to consciously keep remembering, oh, this is what I got to do, and practice it and make it your second nature.
that's a question that I would like to drop here because it's something I get asked a couple of times, especially from people that are aiming for management path. They usually ask me if I want to become a manager, if I want to become a scrum master, for example, do I need to actually know software development if I want to be someone leading those kind of teams? What do you think about that? I have my personal point of view, but yeah, I want to hear from you first.
Interesting one, Hugo. It's a little bit tricky one, isn't it? It's like, if you want to make a nice cake, do you need to be a baker? or do you need to know the recipe well, or do you need to have the right ingredients and know the recipe well? So
I think I think the experience though, what you just said is, do you need to know, be a baker or have the recipe well, or get good ingredients and that kind of thing. But it's the experience of actually making a lot of cakes that makes you a good baker, even if you don't have the
exactly.
title of baker. And I think I kind of touched on that too a little bit earlier. If you're doing the job of a leader, then you kind of if people kind of see that, and then sometimes you get thrust into actually getting the title of manager. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, that's so of the three or four three things I've said, the baker is the one, provided the baker is baking a lot of cake, not baking only bread and has never baked cake. But let's assume that when you say baker, that experience. So that experience is what will make that job second nature for them. So then, if they switch the role slightly and change gears, that experience will still be innate in them, and then they can still spin the same wheels or similar wheels as a whatever role you mentioned, scrum master or any other, because they're still working they're doing scrum mastery of a software development process, right? Because scrum
Yeah,
master doesn't necessarily mean software development. Is everybody in agreement?
yeah,
Because the scrum mastery could be of, like, of putting automobile
I know
parts
what I
together
mean.
and building an automobile. That's a different skill. In the sense, you could apply your scrum mastery there, but then you'll still better to know how the whole process works, right? So yeah, that's, I don't know if that satisfies you, Hugo, but that's my point of view.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say that on this level of, do you need to be in software development to be a manager of software developers? It really depends. It really depends, because you could be a genius software developer and a terrible communicator, and it would be absolutely horrible to put you over people, because you're just going to drive their careers into the ground. Because you have, as a manager, you have a responsibility to shepherd the careers of the people under you. Like that's part of your job, and to do all the HR work and all of this stuff for them. And if you're terrible at communicating and you don't want to be bothered by anything, then no, you're going to be a terrible manager. You're going to run your team into the ground. So just because you're a great developer doesn't mean you're going to be a great manager. But I have actually worked for a lot of different types of managers, and I have worked from ones that have come from a more technical background, and I have worked for ones that have come from, that have no technical background to them. They're managers. They're people managers. That's what they do for a living. And in my experience, if the people managers have enough resources, as far as like project managers and and all the different structure that you would need around having well run a well run project and a well run team and all of that stuff, and a good team lead, right? Then perhaps you don't need to have development experience to be a great manager, because you know how to get the troops up, and you know how to get them moving in a direction that's the vision. But if you don't have all that infrastructure, then not having a technical expertise and having people just throw stuff at your team, and you not being able to step up and go, hey, you're going to destroy our team if you keep doing that, or that's not even possible what you just said. You know, we don't. Right now, we don't have LK99. We can't do room temperature superconducting in this machine that you want to build. That's crazy talk. Stop it. You don't have someone who's in there saying those kind of things that only someone with the technical background might know. And so uh, it's really nuanced. There's actually no straight answer, but it's a spectrum, I suppose.
Yeah, I think makes sense. So it depends on what is the level of understanding the individual who's managing a set of technical people needs to have in order to do justice to the end delivery, right? Uh, if at all the team is very self-reliant and all they need is people and resource manager, then the manager doesn't need to be that technical and need to speak that language, right? But in case they do need to, because if they're going to be talking to stakeholders and semi-technical people, and maybe even technical people from another client side or another partner, then they would need to, they cannot say I've heard managers. So I'm not technical. I'll get the technical person to talk to you about, but this is what I have to say. And I don't know how and what kind of a impression that leaves on the other side, depending on who the other side is. If you're trying to close a deal and you hear that, then it's a sign of weakness, isn't it?
Well, and I mean, remember, there's that story of Ford, Ford cars and stuff like. There's the story of Ford where the accusations were out there that he didn't know anything about the business and shouldn't be running his company and all of this stuff. And then they hold the press conference because he's like, just come in here and ask me any question you want. We're going to get all your questions answered. Just get in here and ask me. And so they hold the press conference, and all these people come in firing questions off. And so first person says, "Here's a question for you." Blah 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 blah. And he goes, "Okay, 1 second." He hits the phone button. This person comes on the line and says, if the question's transmitted to them, and they get the response back. And they do this like 10 times. It's like, look, anything you need, I know how to get it. That's actually also a really good way of being a good leader and manager, is knowing where to get your stuff from that you need when people are asking the hard questions. And that doesn't give necessarily a bad impression depending on how you position that. I know where to get the information from. Just ask whatever question you need. I know how to route it.
Because like I would comment a lot exactly like that. This, if you wanna be a good engineer manager and you are not a good technical on the technical part, you should have someone who you are confident. You have confidence. Someone who you can trust to do that right for you or with you, right? So that's the idea. Like you don't need to be the best in everything. And you can imagine how it would be difficult to get good managers if all good managers should have been the best developers before. You know how difficult it is to get a good developer,
Yeah.
and then it
and
would
then
be
and then
even
manage
more
and then a
difficult.
manager, and then a good developer turning into a manager, that probability is also getting more difficult, isn't it?
And the
The,
thing
the,
And
the
is,
but
funnel the funnel is
yeah,
too lesser, right? So
yeah,
that's the point. So it's not possible. It's not statistically saying possible.
mm,
So of course, the trust is the important thing here.
mm,
So that's why a manager must have some solid soft skills on communication, leadership, uh, empathy, or listening, or all this kind of stuff, because he needs to get trust from many other people to get all the technical part, or to get some other to help them and mentor his careers or whatever. So a
mm,
manager has to have these things. And of course, the I think when a manager have a small amount of technical knowledge, at least if in my as a developer point of view, if the manager has no technical knowledge at all, it's we have a difficult communication. But the manager, see if a manager has like a small amount of technical knowledge, like, oh, I was a medium developer before. Oh, I started my career as a beginner developer, and then I started to do QA stuff, or then I changed it to do design stuff. I don't know. He had like a small portion of technical knowledge, and then become a manager. It's much easier because the communication starts being much more easy to do, and the trust will be easier to make, right? So that's the point. I think you should not be the best, but you should have at least a small amount of it.
I agree. I agree a lot with what Pedro just said. I'm enjoying a lot this discussion too, but we are close. We are reaching here actually 1 hour of conversation, and we do usually end close to this time. But I don't like to end the session with some comments here on the chat. So I want just to go give some time, extend a little bit of time just to give a chance here to share comments from Eli Cruz, Cruz. One issue that is that a significant number of companies don't practice what they preach in their internal policies and promoted culture. And he added here too. And you need to assess how much it goes against the values you believe in, and whether it's worth continuing in an environment like that. Oh, I think that this relates to the what those are saying, right? About staying in a company and understand the culture and so on. Yeah, great. So thanks, El Cruz. And I just want to go here. Yuri Santana also added here, contributed here. Sometimes it's difficult to balance all skills, but we need to improve our skills, soft, hard, people skills, and etc. Yes, just like that. It's not as simple as, oh, I just need to. It's not a simple receipt that we can follow and just forever and take a path without seeing any other thing. I think it became very clear that it's much more complex nowadays. What we have to actually do to grow in our career, and so that's why also we do promote this discussion here to actually answer your question, and also ourselves discover what is the best way to deal with our day-to-day challenges, right? Alfeo just agreed with our conversation here. Perfect. And as long as you keep it running, yep, you're right.
Mm.
And sorry, I have to go through all the comments very quickly here to keep our time, our session on time. We do have Fabio. Actually, I haven't introduced you our tradition here. In every end of the session, we do share some content, a book, a post, an article that we read that is interesting for our audience. If you have anything that you would like to share to our audience, would be great. But if since I haven't said it to you first, I'm not sure if you have time to get something to share here. Feel free to add your contribution. Okay.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, I don't have anything to share right now, but I thank you for the opportunity for to be part of this discussion today. Thank you.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks. So who wants to start by sharing something here today?
I just shared a book that I feel that it's a bit timeless. The book is called Working Effectively with Legacy Code by Michael Feathers. I think many of us have heard about it. It's a great reference. Fabio's already giving a thumbs up. I learned immensely a lot about it, about refactoring code, about legacy code. And the great thing about it is it's not a book that'll just, like, you have versions of Java that get outdated. This book is a great reference for time to come. Yes, the code is probably more Java oriented, but I think the techniques that are spoken of, you can do those techniques in pretty much any language that allows object orientation. And I highly recommend every developer to have a glance of the book and use it as a reference book. You don't have to read. That's a great thing about the book. You don't have to read this book cover to cover. It's a reference book. Whenever you have an issue or a situation, you go through the index or the glossary or the table of contents. You look for what you're looking for. You just practice that bit, apply it, and your problem hopefully is solved.
Great, great. Yeah, thanks a lot, Manny. That's an amazing book. I also have one copy of it, and yeah,
Yeah,
they are very helpful for,
yeah,
especially when we work with legacy code. They have lots of great tips to deal with that challenges, right?
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so
Who's
we've got a
who's
couple of
next?
other suggestions.
Yes.
Douglas has, Pedro has. Go on. Go ahead, guys.
Well, I was going to say that mine. I didn't realize I needed to bring a book recommendation, but or a book. But when we said that, the first thing that popped into my mind, since we do a lot of computer and software development around here, is Algorithms to Live By: The Computer Science of Human Decisions. I've got the link, so hopefully we'll put it in the description somewhere. But this book is really interesting because it goes and shows you some of these algorithms, how they really relate to and how you can use them in your day to day life. And I thought it was really cool from someone who's more self taught, looking at something like that and going, "Oh, that actually is really cool." So there's a lot of cool stuff in there to read about, and I think it'd be cool for anyone that just wanted to kind of see how some of these things that we talk about, or have to use, actually can relate and actually fits into like things you do every day.
Awesome. I have to put it into my into the future books to read. Thanks a lot, Douglas. And yeah, I see Pedro. I see you had a book also.
Yeah, I would suggest. Are you hearing me, right? Yeah, okay. So I would suggest this book is the Never Split the Difference, Negotiate Like Your Life Depend on It. Is a great book from Chris Voss. He's a CIA negotiator. He has so it's a book about negotiation. And he tell his stories about CIA, like negotiate with robbers, or and you can imagine all the criminals and difficult stuff. And then he started doing that for business in Harvard with all the students and whatever. So he has some good tips and advice for negotiating about how the human mind works in a in a practical way, not in a theory, but in a practical way. And he's a book that Bruno's always talks about when he works on his negotiation workshop. So it's a very good book.
Yeah, that's a curious title. I really want to take a look too.
I'll
Yeah, it's
second.
very
It's a
nice,
good book. I'll second it. I've also read that book. It's really good.
really
Great.
good.
Danilo, you have one book here too. I'm sharing now on the chat.
Oh, I strongly recommend this book, The Software Craftsmanship, The New Imperative, and think about the topic that we started talking today, that what does employers expect from us, software developers in tech industry. It's a book that can opens your mind on what you think about that you can do being a software developer. That is not just about coding, that it can bring some mindsets that you can bring much more value to a company, to a community, and a bunch of people that you can impact much more than just coding. Then it can help you with some insights over that. So that's that's a nice book, and that's there is a manifest about it that it's based on it. So it's something that I really enjoy it.
Cool. Thanks a lot, man. And yeah, for from my side, let me share here. I posted recently, since we are talking about what employers expect in the tech industry. One thing that every employer are worried, or at least should be worried about, it's about security on the applications that they build. And since we are talking, we have a lot about LLM and this new hype of ChatGPT stuff. I've shared that OWASP Top 10, they just released a list of top 10 vulnerabilities that is regarding to the LLM solutions, so large language model solutions. I think it's an interesting read for everyone that's touching with such kind of solution or are thinking to add such feature in your application, so you can be aware of the risks and ways to fix them. Okay, so yeah, I think now we have a lot of books and posts today. I hope you enjoy the session. There's a lot of content, special thanks to Fabio Miranda that joined us and answered lots of questions. A very interesting point of view, perspective of the employers' expectations, not just employers, managers, leaders, anyone that's it's leading there on the tech industry. And thanks Danilo, thanks Pedro, thanks Money, thanks Logos too for joining us. Hope to see you guys on the next session. And you guys that is watching us, place your questions. Keep following us if you want to have more interesting answers from experts on the industry. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.